Digibajitunda. All on day, the one that fits ya. Katikin Digibajitunda. All on day, the one that fits.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Nile Book Club. My name is Katasi Kironde, and this month we are discussing Kolol Hill by Neema Shah.
Yes, Kololo Hill is a story set, partly set in 1970s Uganda and England, and it's told through three perspectives, from Jaya, a slightly older Indian woman who made a journey from India to Uganda, Vijay, who's her son, who was born in Uganda, and Asha, who's her daughter-in-law. And it charts their journey as three Indian Ugandans who were part of the expulsion from Uganda to other parts of the world, effectively. So, Vivian, you said you liked this. You said this was amazing. So let's start with you. Like, what made it amazing in your opinion?
I think what I really liked about this book was, I just find it fascinating how Neema, I'm reading it and I can just like feel the despair through the pages. Do you know what I mean? Like the despair and the anxiety and the worry. And it kind of it's given us a glimpse into how Asians felt at that time. Do you know what I mean? Like they essentially, many of them were kind of like in a no man's land. Like Uganda didn't want them, the UK didn't want them, India didn't want them. And it's like, where do we go? Like, families were divided up, they couldn't like, I don't know, what's the word? They couldn't get expelled together. And it's just amazing how she puts that into writing. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, this is, in comparison to We Are All Birds of Uganda, this felt like a slightly more detailed account of the Asian expulsion from Uganda. And also it did give a bit more of a balanced view as well, because she didn't shy away from not only the kind of Indians' perspective of the Ugandans, but also the Ugandans' perspective, or their views on the Asians, I should say, but yeah, mainly Indians. I would say I wrote something. I was going to wait till the end, but I wrote something which is a provocation. It's the first time I've actually made notes, because I went into her acknowledgements and kind of special thanks. And because it was so detailed, I did think, oh, maybe she's had family who were expelled from Uganda, and maybe she herself is a Ugandan Indian. It turns out, no, her family's from Tanzania and Kenya. Now, that doesn't diminish the book, but it made me think, right? There's something she said, that there were no accounts that were similar to December, as in December, the manservant. When I say similar, I mean there wasn't any Indians, as far as she knows, who actually treated local Ugandans as Fran's family treat December. So it made me think, why was that story, why was that character, or at least that dynamic, put into the story, if that's not something she can back up? Everything else she could back up. If there wasn't any Indian families that really protected the Ugandans or treated them as equals, why are Ugandan servants, at least, why was that put in? And it made me think. I have my own version, maybe I can like say it later on, but did you guys have an opinion about that, about December's relationship with the family, the Pran's family? Because I'm diving straight in on the controversial element, like I'm not, Katasi, I'll ask you. Your opinion first, and then maybe you can tell me what you thought about what I just said.
Thanks. So I enjoyed it. I think it was a little bit slow to begin with, and then I think it gradually built up. And I agree with what Vivian said it really gave you an insight into a more personal experience of what these people encountered during the expulsion. Because I often think that when I hear the stories, or, you know, when I hear my relatives talk about it, who might have lived through this time, it's always very vague and quite broad. And then the South Asian that I've met in London, a lot of their living relatives don't want to talk about it. And I understood that more now, having read this, because of all the personal accounts that she got together. But I felt like in some aspects it was lacking in historical context. And I agree that it was more balanced than We Are All Birds of Uganda. And I was trying not to draw comparisons, but it's hard not to. I thought she provided more balance in the anti-Blackness and those sentiments. But to answer your question, I also went to the back of the book and I saw that she said that she had not heard of any experiences or sort of tales of Asians in Uganda being sort of, I don't know, hospitable or like, you know, protecting the indigenous. But she referenced the Mau Mau rebellion, and she knew of some South Asians who protected some Mau Mau rebels in Kenya and that uprising. So I did wonder, so why did she do that? And I think it was because maybe that's the hard part to digest, that actually, whilst we feel pity for the South Asians who were made stateless, you know, that really rang, like that was really emphasized for me. I never really could understand, like, I never appreciated that these people were made to be stateless. And I think a lot about statelessness through that, is it Begum? I forget her name. You know, that girl that went to Iraq as a jihadi.
Shamima Bergam.
Yeah.
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 16-year-old.
Yeah, I think a lot about statelessness in that context, especially around like people of color. So this was really powerful for me. But I think because it's such a sad story in terms of what happened to South Asians, it's hard to reconcile what their role was in terms of the suppression that they imposed on the local Ugandans through their financial might. That perhaps this was her way of reimagining what could have been and what allegiances could have been created.
I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that last part. I don't know if it was to do with allegiance. I think it was a way to kind of portray. I wrote down, could it be, I'm just posing this, could it be a way to portray the image of the Indian in Uganda as some kind of savior? Because it was a running kind of narrative throughout the book where even when they came here, when Pran, I kept saying Pran's family, I meant Jaya, but it is Pran. Pran, the eldest son, when he finally arrived in the UK, he always had this kind of feeling of he has to go back to Uganda. And he was obviously, the reason he wanted to go there is because he wanted to complete his father's legacy. But there was a little bit of like, they can't live without us. They can't move on without us. And there's a character that talks about that they're realizing that the Asians that they kicked out were actually helping, you know, their economies, and they, you know, the businesses are not flourishing. And even in Birds of Uganda, they talked about these factories that were just basically derelict and messed up because the locals couldn't, you know, do anything about it. So there is a little bit of this image of the Indian in Uganda as the savior, and the Ugandans being unable to continue and flourish without them. And I feel like that kind of the storyline of the narrative of December being saved by this Indian family is further kind of perpetuating that image for me. And that's why maybe she put it in there, because if it didn't exist in Uganda, why slap it in there? But it's just another way to kind of just present the Indian in Uganda of that time as a savior. That's how I saw it as. That was my interpretation.
Oh.
Am I wrong? Vivian, have you got an opinion on that?
mean, I think at the end of the day, like the Indian, like Ugandan relationship was always complex. And you can even just kind of like to go off on a tangent, but you can even see it like in South Africa, how Indians were treated better than blacks. You know what I mean? So in their minds, they always thought that they were superior. But the funny thing is when if these Indians who were in Uganda were to go back to India, they would be on the lower end of the caste system. Do you know what I mean? So that's like it's kind of hilarious because you acting like you are so superior in Africa, but when you go back to where you come from, you're not. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. I think having like lived in Uganda for 9 years as well and kind of saw Indians not mixing with black people. I have a friend who was married to an Indian, but like she's the only one I know, and they're divorced now. But it's like we did not mix, we lived on separate ends. But one thing Indians are known for in Uganda is being wealthy. Do you know what I mean? And that financial might, Katas, that you speak of, is legendary, unfortunately. And of course, when they left, a hole was felt. But I think it's also because they left, not that Ugandans couldn't like take care of the dukas or whatever, but because they had been so protective of their knowledge, yeah, they didn't share it with indigenous people. So when they left, people really didn't know what to do with Kakira. They didn't know what to do with all these factories because they had not been let in to be part of management. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe you're yeah.
So it does make sense because I think but Hafsa talked about it in that, and also in this book she doesn't go into the same level of detail about not giving them opportunities. I think she more talks about, from what I remember, the personal treatment of the Ugandans and how, for example, the servants, they're still called boy and girl, even though they were grown-ups and stuff like that. So, but you do, based off of that, it is alluded to the Ugandans not being trusted to be able to run the dukas and run the factories on the management side. And yeah, and I think she did leave that bit out especially when I think Pran was talking to another character, I forgot his name, but the one who was planning to go back when they went to visit him. And they talk about, yeah, they're realizing that they can't go on without us. And, we want the source of their problems. But of course, if you don't give people the opportunity to train them or, give them the chance to actually work in your businesses beyond just being your servant, then yeah, once you leave, they're not going to know what to do with that. And it's evident in so many different industries and so many different historical moments. But yeah, like, I think I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it a lot more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. I did really, really enjoy reading it. I think she's a really good writer. And she, did present a very kind of detailed account of the Indian Ugandan. And it kind of gave me an insight that I hadn't seen. And I love that, yes, she definitely didn't shy away from just how much bigotry can exist within the Indian community in regards to the Ugandans, the terms that they were using, was it Salah and colors and it was really well-rounded characters because she wasn't trying to make them seem like they were perfect, but I still think they were kind of a little bit made into, some of them were made into angels and they were romanticized a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Just before we go into the angels, Kalunji, I know what you mean around like back to December. Let's exhaust December. I don't know what I thought about it, really. I don't know if I was convinced by that storyline because, I In fact, we should call him Adenia, right? Was that his name?
I was trying to remember his name.
I think it's Adenia. I just wondered why he just didn't leave. He could have just left. But I thought it was really smart how she incorporated the ethnic tensions between Idi Amin's regime and the Acholis.
Yeah.
You know, that there was way more nuance than there was in other books. We'll keep it brief that we've read.
I think part of the reason why maybe he couldn't leave was because he was from the Acholi tribe. And they did say that his daughter, he wasn't sure what happened to his daughter or his family, because the little, I guess, like what you just said about the ethnic tensions. So Idi Amin, not liking the Acholis, he would have been a perfect target if he was to roam the streets. But it did seem a bit kind of, I know also, maybe you lot felt the same. How come we didn't get a perspective from December?
Exactly. Where was the indigenous voice? That was one of my critiques around the indigenous voice. He was just a servant, and the only sort of things we heard were through them saying, well, they think this about us, but we never heard an account from December.
And we had very minimal accounts from any of the Black Ugandans. Was it Grace, the servant for that wealthy lady, Mrs. Goswami, right? I love when they came back to, and she was, basically cussing them and insulting them. But it would have been great to see them interact as well. Like briefly, there were extras. Again, the Ugandans are extras in these kind of stories, and it's a shame, because maybe it's not a shame. Maybe it's actually indicative of how, like Vivian, you said, Indians in Uganda don't really interact with Ugandans beyond them being either customers or servants or workers. They don't really get that. So when writers like Neema Shah or Hafsa Zayad write these stories, it's going to be difficult to find the so-called indigenous account, because they would have to go out on the street and actually speak to them. But a lot of times they don't, because they haven't gone to Uganda before they write the novel. But also they might find it hard to find these accounts, because maybe the people closest to them also didn't interact with them. So maybe she felt she wasn't in a position to write from December's account perspective, or anyone else's, any Black Ugandans perspective, because what Black Ugandans did she know?
But she went to Uganda to write before she wrote this. She spent a week there. And also she makes reference to people of mixed heritage. And there's plenty of those in Uganda. Just go to Old Kampala, they're there. But I think, again, it's the limitations of just, you're hearing accounts from your immediate family. So like, you're right. So how do you then seek out African voices? But I also think that with Pran wanting to go back home, it wasn't just about saving these Ugandans. It was also the fact that she's speaking to those who did go back and who did stay, and that we see the likes of like Sudhir, who profited from the absence of those who left, bought up businesses, ran them. And I think that's who Pran probably was. Pran?
Yeah, it was, but yeah, Pran, the eldest brother. What did you think of, moving on a little bit, Vivian, what do you think of Asha and VJ's kind of tense relationship? Did you see that coming? Like the little chemistry and electricity that they had? And did you feel, and I asked, did you feel it was a betrayal of Pran? Did they betray him by, even though they didn't explore it, but just that being in the air?
I was hoping I didn't have to mention this, but I've kind of gone halfway through the book, so I didn't really finish it. But I did see them kind of, flirting with one another. But I think in the beginning, when was it Pran who went to the UK?
No, I think wasn't it VJ who got
VJ,
sent?
yeah, VJ went to the UK in the beginning to like take the money, right? No. Yeah, it was VJ, yeah. And then, Asha gets to know that the Duka is not doing that well. And she's like, oh, you should have told me, blah, blah, blah. And I think that was kind of like the beginning of kind of a crack forming in their marriage, although they kind of got over it, you know, like they spoke, they kind of reconciled, and she was glad that they did, but it kind of left a mark. Do you understand? And unfortunately, I think with that rift that wasn't truly healed between them, I'm not surprised that VJ kind of, you know, but this is not uncommon. I'm sorry to say this, but it's not uncommon that like brothers-in-laws and sisters like that because I'm not saying I've done it, but it's not uncommon. Do you know what I mean? Because as the wife, you kind of see your brother-in-law as not your husband, but he kind of reminds you of your husband. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a weird thing. I'm not condoning it, but I'm not surprised either.
And especially if he's not there, if Pran
exactly,
it becomes because yeah, there was. I mean, I didn't see it coming, even though it was strange that they were spending a lot of time with each other. But I just thought, oh, they were just like brother and sister a little bit. They were the way their relationship, the jokes they were making. So it did seemingly come out of nowhere. But I guess it was a nice device to like keep us reading and add a little bit of tension. But yeah, it is, you know, I guess yeah, I'm not married, so I can't really speak on that.
But even in our culture, it's really weird. But in our culture, my husband's brother is my husband.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Abamwami Wang. He's like, yeah. So I'm not that I would explore that, but as Baganda, that is actually a thing. So
yeah. Is it the same? Is it the same for like if my wife? So her.
Oh yeah, her sister.
Well?
Yeah, she's your wife. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I saw it coming, but I wasn't sure that it was enough to create the chaos that it did. And I also wondered when Jaya would pick it up, because I mean, she's an older woman. I'd imagine she'd be intuitive and she'd see, but there was never any sort of comment from her. I was waiting for her to, you know, when she said, I need to speak to you, there were moments where she was, you know, she had Asha one-on-one. I'm like, oh, this is a point where she's going to call her out on having or seeing this sort of vibe between her and her other son, but it never happened. I don't think it, do I think it was betrayal? No, again, it was just proximity. And these things often happen in like, I don't want to say war, but where there's conflict, you know, love and, I think there was actually a book about that. I forgot the name of it, but it's a common thing, you know, I think.
But could it be, sorry, could it be that Jaya did not notice? Because, I mean, she was filled up with her own grief.
That's true. I did think
right that. Like her husband had died, like it was, and she's just trying to figure out like, where are we going? Like she's kind of like, and December is still hidden, you know, she's like, there's so much going on. She's trying to figure out what's our next move. And so yes, like she could have been intuitive, but I think at this point in time, that was like the last thing on her mind. Like she wasn't.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, but by this time when they have their little brief moment, they're in the UK. So okay, the husband has died. It's been maybe a year or so since or maybe a few months since he passed away, but still it is pretty recent. But the thing is that I think she was having her own readjustment kind of like problems that maybe she didn't have time to notice these things. But I did wonder, like, surely there will be a time where you would clock, right? If your son and your daughter-in-law, they used to talk a lot, and then now they're in the room and they can't talk to each other over breakfast. Like you think, what's happening with you two? Like surely Jaya wasn't that naive because she was a clever woman, you know. But on the other hand, she had literally been shipped from India to Uganda, and she's always been looked after by December, looked after by, is it Motichand. So everything has always been looked at, and then even now in her old age, she's looked after. So she hasn't always been someone who's been off the world. So maybe there are things she wouldn't clock, certain things she wouldn't, and this could have been one of those things. Maybe that's why she didn't clock, just naive.
No, that's a good point. I liked Jaya's character and how she found, I liked how like Neema presented Uganda as a place where she could find space to just be, and Jaya was able to evolve. You know, she took on new responsibilities, and there was a freedom that she had that she knew she would never have in India. And likewise, when she came to England, she starts her own catering business. I thought that was really nice. And I think there were some really strong female characters. And then just on the topic of food, I really liked reading about all the meals they were having. And that was probably the most consistent thing that brought them together as a family. Despite all the upheaval, when they came to the table, food just sounded delicious. And I really like the fact that Neema just explained what kind of food they were eating at times, because obviously I don't understand like Gujarati cuisine. Some stuff we obviously know, like samosas and paratha, but that was obviously for the author, for us, the reader, as opposed to just keeping it within the culture. And it reminded me of this other book that I read many years ago, The Settler's Cookbook. Can you see it? It's by Yasmin Ali-Bahai Brown. Do you know her? She's a famous British commentator, and she's also South Asian, Indian, Ugandan.
Cookbook. It's pretty hefty.
It's hefty, but what she does is it's really smart. She incorporates her story. Her parents were born in Tanzania and East Africa, and Yasmin was actually born in Uganda, and went to Makerere. And then along the way, alongside telling her story and her memoirs, she incorporates recipes of the different places. So I thought that was it. And Neema Shah actually read this book to write hers, for all the historical context, I think, and the experiences of making it over and being in England and that whole new identity. But I think that the Settlers Cookbook provides much more context around the history and the anti-Blackness, which I do want us to go back to in a bit. But yeah, I don't know if you guys thought the food was mouth-watering, because I was really pulled in by that.
Vivian, did you think the food was mouth-watering the way she described it?
Yeah, I do agree with Katasi. I like the way she described the food. It kind of made you, next time if you go to like an Indian restaurant, like kind of be like, oh, I want to try that. Or if you order Indian takeout. But I think the thing that irked me a bit, I think she was talking about cassava and should call it mogo.
I did see that. Was that?
Yeah, and I'm like, it's muogo, but I don't know, maybe that's the Swahili way, or did anyone know?
I did.
Yeah.
I did clock that. Yeah, I thought
It's
maybe.
the Swahili way.
Sorry?
It's the Swahili way of saying muogo, really. And a lot of South Asian Ugandans refer to it as that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay. Speaking of words, there's certain things I didn't know were the Indian communities influence Uganda a lot. So there's like the word for shop in Luganda, right? Does that come from the Gujarati word? Like they kept calling it duka or duka.
Dukarat. Right.
Dukarat. So is that where we get the word duka from?
I think so.
And then I also saw sifiria for like a pen. Is that where we get the word for a sifiria as well? Because she did write that as well. I'm opening the book and I'll find it. But
I think that some of the words were Swahili and some were Gujarati. I remember like these people came in from the coast into the interior via Mombasa, right? And there's lots of Swahili words that we use in Luganda as well. So I don't necessarily think that they are Gujarati words.
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, I wasn't that surprised if that was the case, because you know, there's that influence even in English. Like, you know, there's words that find their way from France and Germany and whatever, and they become regular everyday English words, and you don't realize the kind of the impact. Yeah, you said you were going to talk. Go on.
No, I just have one question, and this has been like since I started this book, it's been on my mind. I even had to Google it. Okay, so first of all, we have this situation where where some Indians can't go to the UK because they don't have British passports. Okay. And so I had to Google. I'm like, how do you get a British passport? And apparently you can get a British passport if your grandparents had been born in the UK? Can you guys just help me out? Like, you have to have had someone born in the UK, and then from there you can piggyback. Okay. So now my question is, and this, like, just help me out here. Maybe I'm just being dumb. Indians came from India to the East African coast to work on the railway. Okay. So automatically, I would assume that most Indians have Ugandan, Tanzanian, or Kenyan passports, right? But when did Indians go to the UK and then come back to Uganda? I think that's the thing that kind of, I didn't understand that part. How did they get their UK passports? Because I'm assuming their parents were not born in the UK and then went back to India. Do you understand what I mean? Someone help me out, please.
Yes, maybe Katasi, you might be more clued up on it. I do have a theory, but I could be wrong though. I just don't know.
Right. So you know what? This book made me really want to spend some time like researching this topic, because I think that they were. I don't have the answer to that, and I think that the policy at the time encouraged certain communities to apply and to be able to get status, because it's, you know, I was wondering, well, if these Indian Ugandans were given access to getting these British passports, what were the Africans doing? Like, why are they
exactly? Thank you.
You know,
thank you.
And there's some very interesting theories around you know, we can't avoid talking about like the British in this and what their role was in perpetuating the injustice, right? And these racist policies that allowed Indian Ugandans to be on a higher level. And I think the giving of different like citizenships was also part of it, because in the end they did let them in, right? But I don't know, I can't answer your question outrightly. I don't know the answer to it, I'm afraid. But maybe Kalonji has a theory.
I thought it was to do with the Commonwealth. I thought during that time, in the same way, and again, I could be wrong, in the same way that there were like people from the Caribbean who were invited to come to the UK, and it was almost like they got automatic citizenship, because at that time there was the invitation and the whole Commonwealth and the mother country being the UK. So if you had the money, you could apply to actually come and live in the UK, and you might be guaranteed a British passport. Because remember, there's a character in here who was able to travel freely, and they make reference to him having not given up his, I think, because there were some characters who didn't give up their Ugandan passport, and if you gave up I think if you got your UK passport, you had to give up your Ugandan passport, and that was maybe part of the frustration that Amin had. Is like, hey, you guys are having your cake and eating it too. So you have your British passport, but then you're living in Uganda, and so you can't be in both places. So I think it could have been, we'll look into this. It could have been the whole Commonwealth thing, so they had the money to be able to apply, and they could be invited and have the UK passports, but they had to let go of the Ugandan passports as well.
Yeah, I think there's something about it was an option as well, but Yasmin Ali Brown mentions that a lot of Africans saw it as like being traitors if they got their UK passports, because this is at the time of like colonial of like independence, you know, just on the brink of independence. So you're siding with the British was sort of seen as, well, you're not patriotic enough, and there was that spirit of Pan-Africanism. But yeah, I really like to understand it a bit more. And you know, when I read the reviews about this book, a lot of people say, oh, I had no idea about this topic. Oh, well, this is shocking. We take it for granted that we're Ugandans. But now, even in talking about this, like, I don't know enough of the history, like this policy and all this stuff, the intricacies. And I think that's what's fascinating for me.
But you know, they also got rid of that. I remember part of the thing that was this Enoch Powell guy, he did a speech, the River of Blood speech, right? And he was kind of complaining that there were too many Black people in the UK. And I think that was also linked to the fact that because of the Commonwealth, those countries in the Commonwealth, they could apply for a passport and actually come to the UK. So a lot of British people were like upset that that was an automatic thing. But of course, like you said, there were many different reasons why. And then, then they got rid of it. I think sometime in the 70s, they were like, there were way too many people taking advantage of that. And like you said, it's either they couldn't afford, okay, you got the passport, but can you afford to get the ticket and then also be able to live and have a job in the UK? That's something else as well. But also, like you said, the Pan-Africanism, and if you got the British passport, then you're not as loyal to your African kind of side. And of course, Amin was like, well, why do you have the British passport and you have Ugandan residency as well? You have to decide. And some of the Indians that stayed, they're the ones who actually they didn't have that agreement. They didn't have that arrangement, rather. They had the Ugandan passport, and I think he allowed them to stay. But the ones who kind of did have that one foot in the UK, I think they're the ones he was kind of encouraging to get out of here, because you can't, what did he say? You can't milk the cow or whatever without feeding it or something.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but of course, this is something to research, and also this is so tiny, but it did make me want to like research more into kind of Indian history and Indian culture. Like it's such a silly thing, but I recently watched this film called Triple R. I don't know if it's called Triple R or RRR. It's on Netflix. I was like, damn, like the Indian culture is so strong, like historically as well. And, you know, and of course, because it's set during the partition of India and Pakistan. And you can see how complicated it is. They have like 200, you know, languages apparently, or 200 different tribes. Like, just because you're Indian, it doesn't necessarily mean that they welcome you. There's all these kind of complications that, Vivian, you mentioned the caste system, and this tribe is bigger than the other tribe, or considered less than, or whatever. So they do have a lot of, and because I always wondered, well, you could just go back, right? But yeah, it's almost like some African Americans trying to decide to go back to, say, West Africa. Like they've had such a big disconnect. For some of them, they hadn't been there for hundreds of years. So it's like, what do you want me to go back to? I speak the language they were speaking as well, like, had moved on, and they didn't do the same things. It's completely different. Like on a smaller scale, it's like me, when I go back to Uganda, I'm not as Ugandan as I think I am. You know, and I'm sure there's British people here who look at me, or even Priti Patel wants people to go back to countries under the assumption that, hey, you can just assimilate easily, but actually you can't. There's a major kind of difference to your upbringing and to that upbringing as well. And it's ironic that Priti Patel, who claims, by the way, that her parents came from Uganda as part of the expulsion, but someone found out that actually no, they'd been here long before then. But you'd think that she would have a little bit of sympathy for people being taken somewhere they have no connection to, but she clearly doesn't. So I did have a lot of sympathy for these characters based off of what Neema had written, because you're like, wow, like I just thought just go to India, like surely, like you're Indian, you do, but no, there's a lot more to it. Just like if I was thrown in Uganda and I had to live there forever, maybe me it's not that big of a deal, but my brother, for example, if he was sent to Uganda, British people here just think, oh, you were born in Uganda, but he left when he was 1. He doesn't know anything about Uganda, like.
Yeah, and Asha says it. I like that scene with Asha where some white guy walks past her and is like, go back home, and she's like, I can't.
Yeah,
like she mumbles it under her breath. And this was like a big theme in the book, wasn't it, around like where is home? And displacement. And I think she presented it really well. And these people are like their third generation, you know, like Pran and the kids are anyway. But in the Settlers Cookbook, Yasmin Al-Bahai goes more into the detail around what the flight was like. I really like that scene on the airplane because I've seen the images of these Indian Ugandans arriving at Stansted, I think it was, in their saris, you know, for them, you know, it's not really the best weather to come to. But I loved how she described that people were even sitting in the what?
The aisles.
The aisles, yeah, you know, and passing around their food. By the way, I think I really recommend this book because Yasmin Al-Bahai says that there's one scene where this woman, she's kept her gold. She cooked some like bhajis or some like Indian food, and she baked her gold into it so she could hide it, you know. And she's, you know, and it was the airplane was unifying because even in Uganda, not everybody was Gujarati. You had Hindus, you had different castes of people, but the expulsion brought them together. And when they come to the UK, you know, no one can tell you're just brown. And also in doing some research last year, I was looking for a strong, balanced South Asian voice. And I found it really difficult to find. But when I finally did find one, he's Indian Ugandan, he's lived there for like a very long time, he was born there. He made a really good point that a lot of the Indians in Uganda that were perpetuating this anti-Blackness were from the places where there's a caste system. So of course, when you come to Uganda and you've got Black people, you're automatically going to put them at the bottom. So and he says that there's a lot of nuance and understanding the Indians that were there. It's not just like one collective. So ultimately, like, it's important to go into the detail. That's what I'm trying to say.
Which makes sense. I think it's kind of like having clusters as well. Like you have the Indians coming to Kampala from the coast, and they kind of all settling in Kololo, which today is a very affluent neighborhood, you know. But at that time, it still was. But as you said, that they settled regardless of where they came from in India. Do you know what I mean? It's like in the UK, we're Ugandans. We don't really look at tribe. You know what I mean? Like we're all kind of mixed. We don't really care where people come from. We are just like, we speak the same language. Most of us speak Luganda, so that kind of unifies us. But I think it just saddens me of the anti-Blackness, and that's why like the relationship between Jaya and December, I found beautiful. You know what I mean? Like I appreciated how helpful he was to her. I appreciated how, he could see that she'd get tired, and in the beginning when she came, like she wasn't used to like spending time with a man on her own, and a Black man at that. And she was like, oh my goodness, like what would my parents say or my family? But he was humble, he was polite, he was a gentleman, you know what I mean? And I think that also led to her being very protective of him and allowing him to stay and to hide him just because of how kind he was to her when she had just come to Kampala.
Yeah, I find it interesting that they were aware that, well, I don't know if they were aware, but like at least Neema talks about them knowing that the servants are referred to as boy and girl, irrespective of how old they are. But they seem, at least this family seemed a little bit more aware. You'd think maybe even Jaya would speak to them and say, hey, why would you call him the boy or the servant, or, you know, call him by his name. Actually, in fact, you know, I think there's a time where we reveals his name, but even then they still call him December. Even then,
But you have to remember, they didn't have the same relationship like Jaya had with him. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't have like their relationship was special, and therefore she had that kind of respect for him. But I don't think the others had that kind of relationship with him, and therefore to them, sorry, he was a houseboy. End of. Like.
But then why did Asha? I also felt like her reaction towards Pran basically telling December. Oh, by the way, this is a spoiler for you, Vivian.
Oh, it's all right. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So when I don't know if you've got to the stage where these two soldiers come into their house and they're drunk, and it leads to VJ being hit over the head, but also later on it transpires that Pran basically gave money to December for him to leave because he was tired of them harboring him, and he felt like him being there was actually putting them at danger. But
he didn't leave, did he? No, he didn't leave.
Oh, he did leave. He
did leave.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So he got to leave eventually, but it was made to seem as though the soldiers got him and dragged him out. When Asha remembered the memory, and also VJ as well told little aspects of it, they were like, actually, it was very strange because we didn't hear any dragging or any screaming. It was very calm. Yeah. So then, but I feel like her response to him, apparently that was a lie, big lie, unforgivable lie. But I think she just wanted to escape that relationship and needed a reason because, like really and truly, she didn't care about December when he was there. I never saw no interaction between Asha and December. So why was she crying and saying, "I can't believe you lied to me"? And you clearly don't care that much about Jaya either because you hardly speak to her. She has to go to the shop by herself. So I think Jaya was the only one who did have that relationship with December. But also, why did if Asha liked December so much, why didn't she make an effort to call him by his real name, or make an effort to invite him in the house, and then only during the day, in the nighttime, get him to be in the cupboard? But you kept him in the cupboard like Harry Potter all day.
But do you know what, Kalunji? As much as we want these characters to speak up and to, defy the norm, it just wouldn't be true. It wouldn't be true to the context that they're in. Like,
then why did she put December there? Because even the Jaya-December relationship also wouldn't have been true.
The reason, this is where the author's voice comes in. This is her imagining. I mean, Neema Shah sounds quite progressive, So this is just her putting like, what could be? It's a fantasy. That's why it's called fiction.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It is fiction, but she could have taken that fantasy further. Then she could have made December and Jaya have a relationship as well.
Hey, okay.
Because that was slightly
that's what I felt. I felt I felt something there. Do you know what I mean? Like that there was something there, but she didn't explore it. But I could, and I even thought that something was going to happen between them because there was that fondness, that kindness, that, you know what I mean? And I don't know. But also, going back to Asha, like you have to remember, when you marry into a family, I know people like Meghan Markle, they made waves when they married into the royal family, but ordinary people, when you marry into a family, you don't want to make waves. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to start commanding how the houseboy should be treated, or like, I'm not going to get involved. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not my place. I'm just going to look on. So I can kind of understand where Asha was coming from. Like, she didn't say much because maybe she felt like, okay, I'm new into this family. I'm trying to find my own feet. To be honest, December is like the least of my worries right now. I'm just trying to get through this day by day. Do you know what I mean? With my in-laws and all that. So I can kind of understand where the author was coming from with not over exploring the Asha December perspective.
Yeah, true. I agree. I definitely agree. But I think Asha was a different kind of person. And that's why her perspective was put alongside Jaya's, because Jaya was a little bit more traditional. But whereas Asha, because even the way she got with Pran wasn't traditional. They started dating and they catch them on road holding hands and they'll go, quickly, quickly, come and get together. So I thought she was a unique kind of woman. And in fact, she makes, or she's made to appear as though she's different. She talks back to her husband. She really, challenges him in a way that I keep calling Pran, the way Jaya didn't challenge Motichand. So I thought maybe Asha would be unique. Maybe she would be the one to speak up and say, hey, the way you're treating December is a bit wrong. Let him come in and eat the pilau rice with us. Don't just give him the lemon like a dog,
I think that's fair actually. Like she could have, but she didn't.
She didn't.
I wanted to ask what you thought about Kololo Hill. Like, what did you think about the world building in Uganda?
The what, sorry?
Like the building of the world and like what we knew about it. What were your thoughts on it?
Sorry, the rebuilding of the world. What do you mean?
Sorry, I mean, like, so the building of the world, like what we saw and what we knew about Kololo Hill, like the surroundings, the community, or if there was, because I just felt like when I thought about it, there was more detail in the UK than there was around Kololo Hill. I just can't picture it. I can picture like the landscape which she refers to and the sounds of the crickets and the glowing embers of the mosquitoes, not the malaria.
That malaria.
By malaria.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I felt like I wanted a bit more. And I wondered if you felt like you knew enough about.
But wait, Katasi, you just asked us and then you're answering for us. Can we? Go on, Vivian, do you want to start?
I think the thing is, because I've been to Kololo and I know how beautiful it is, and I know how the houses, that traditionally built houses, it's just a gorgeous place in Kampala. So I didn't really dwell on that too much because I've been, do you know what I mean? I've kind of walked those streets. I kind of know what it looks like. But I can understand the need to kind of understand more of, in Uganda, what were their surroundings? Because you kind of get to know what the duka looked like and you get the explanation of that. But maybe because they weren't there for so long. Do you know what I mean? They kind of left. When we get in the book, we start off and then like maybe a year and a half after they've left for the UK. So maybe because they weren't there for so long.
I agree, Katasi, and also Vivian. I've been to Kololo a little bit, so I haven't spent as much time as you have. So I definitely also agree that it's a beautiful kind of picturesque place. A lot of wealthy people there. But I think, Katasi, I see what you mean. But I wonder if the lack of detail was partly to do with her not being there during the 70s. So Kololo then is different to Kololo now. But I will say this before you comment. I do agree that it did lack a lot of detail. It was very kind of broad strokes, like, oh yes, she makes reference to one little tree that had whatever, a mango hanging from it, or like you said, a mosquito, crickets in the background. It just lacked detail, and whereas in the UK, I mean, she was very detailed to the tube stations and the corner of the street. And you knew that from coming in from the Piccadilly line, from wherever, London, Stansted, or wherever they came from, maybe Heathrow, but they stopped off at South Kensington. And you know that's that journey you make when you're coming from, if you're coming into West London on the tube. You know that the buses, when she makes reference to certain areas, you get that. But I think, it lacked detail in Uganda. And that's the same problem I had with We Are All Birds. It was very kind of broad, just typical.
But it's because they've not been there. Like, as you said, she'd been there for a week. Like, a week is not a lot. Do you know what I mean? It's not gonna allow you to give that detailed, but she is from London. And therefore, because London is home to her, she's gonna be able to, describe the areas like the back of her hand.
I feel that, okay, it's interesting to hear your views. I was thinking that maybe because the focus was on the last few days before they leave, there wasn't an opportunity to explore their surroundings because they were in the house a lot of the time. But actually, no, they were going to Viduka. But how were they getting to Viduka? Were they getting there on an ox? Were they driving there? What kind of car were they driving? Were they driving a VW Beetle? You know, what were the roads like? And to say that, well, she's British or Neema is British or whatever, there's so many, it's not 1804, it's 1972. There's loads of archives around, photographic archives of that time. So I don't think it's an excuse, but yeah, I wanted a bit more detail, but maybe, yeah, I just wanted a bit more detail actually.
But we do get to know that the roads were littered with soldiers. We do get to know that the roads were kind of empty. Yeah. So.
But life was continuing. Like if we think about the last King of Scotland, for example, you know, alongside like the chaos of Idi Amin, life was still lifing, or for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah. Because my dad would have been, you know, growing up during that time, and they survived to be long enough to meet my mom, and you know, people were still going to school, and I would have also wanted to know, like, yeah, what road did you take to get to that Dukak, or you know, what did you see on the
side? Where was the Duka? On what road?
Exactly.
In Nakasero, where is it? Is it in, you know, Kamocha, Bokoto? Where is it?
There we go. Whereas I think when she's in the UK, she's very, very detailed where they're getting the bus from, what road, what part of, you know, they were in, whatever, Acton, or if they're in South Kensington, very, very specific. But this just becomes a broad kind of thing. I mean, I think, you know, being in Uganda for a week, like you said, Vivian, doesn't give you enough time, but that's not a good enough excuse. I think you could have watched enough YouTube videos, even spoken to some family members, like how were the roads there? But then she's from Tanzania and Kenya, so maybe she could have, I don't know.
So what's interesting is I kind of wish that we'd read this last year before we read We Are All Birds of Uganda. And it's the 50th anniversary of the expulsion this year. So there's actually lots of things happening. I sent Kalunji a couple of links. There's some like some Indian, Ugandan or East African communities who've been given money from like big lotteries. So we're doing lots of stuff. But again, I think I mean, I've only looked at it very briefly, but from what I can see, I think that, again, the African voices are missing in this. And I think that's really important because our ancestors or our families experienced this tragedy. And I think that dialogue needs to happen, and we have an opportunity to do that, especially while these people are still living.
Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he apparently, wasn't it like, I don't want to get this number wrong, wasn't it like 500,000 people who like disappeared or something happened to them as a result of his regime? So of those there's so many people affected, so their relatives and there's yet to be a story that kind of gives us that perspective. And I think sometimes we do, of course you want to hear this perspective as well, but I think it overrides. We're talking thousands of people, like tens of thousands, but then hundreds of thousands of people affected, and you're telling me we can't get a story like, you know, that centers those perspectives beyond Last King of Scotland, you know? Like, come on, let's maybe they exist and we just, they're in Uganda and we just don't go to those stores or whatever. But I just think also those, like you said, Katasi, the Black Ugandan voices also need to be amplified as well, and alongside these voices. Yeah.
I think one thing that kind of comes to mind when you say that a dialogue needs to be had is 1990, I think it was 95, when Museveni welcomed the Asians back and he gave them their things, as they called them. And so people were giving back their properties, they were giving back their factories, you know, welcomed back to Uganda. And the thing is, we now come back to this white, like the savior complex. It's Museveni essentially saying, oh, these people are the ones to save our economy. And so I'm thinking this conversation that needs to be had, it's going to be had on what grounds? Like, do you know what I mean? Because now you're already telling us that Asians are better than us. So they'll come into this conversation thinking that we're here to save you. What can you give us? Do you know what I mean? So you've got that power imbalance already. And I don't know. I don't know how I can formulate myself, but it just saddens me that as Africans, there's been so much lack, but not because we're not educated, not because we're smart, but because we're not given the chance, we're not given the opportunity. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just wow. Yeah.
We're just not valued. I agree with you, Vivian. We're just not valued. And not only are we not valued, but evident in what you just said about Museveni giving the Asians back their properties, we also don't value each other. You know, like you hear stories of politicians who will go to Europe or America for treatment over being treated in their own hospitals. You know, we just don't value each other. And to a certain extent, we end up also not valuing ourselves. And it's like a concerted effort to kind of to step out of that and go and see value in our fellow Ugandans, see value in our fellow Africans. Whereas other kind of, I'll say white people, it's a default. It's a default that an Englishman's going to meet another Englishman, depending on the class, of course, and they're going to go, yes, old boy, I know you can do it. Go do it, and you can make as many mistakes as you want. I'll come and save you and help you. But whereas with us, man, we're getting -5 chances. We're not getting given that opportunity to be able to start a business, and okay, the business doesn't work out, get given another chance. You've lost the minute you start, and it's like, I don't know if it's something that we all need to be aware of. Like, this is because I know that I've been kind of told that you can't trust Ugandans, right? I've been told that. So I fight really hard to fight against that. And of course, we come across Ugandans that prove that, but that could also be the same for other nationalities. We give those other nationalities and other races second chances, third chances, fourth chances, but an African lets you down, that's it. I've had enough of these Africans. Let me go off and work with Swedish people, you know? Yeah, we just don't value. I think, to summarize, we don't value each other and ourselves.
But also, I think just quickly, and I think this thing of the power imbalance it's really sad, because the fact is, I'm really sorry, but these Indians were not educated that came to Uganda. Like, they were on the bottom of the rung. Do you know what I mean? And they came and they were able to get all this wealth. It's because as Africans, we saw them and we thought, oh, Muzungu, Muyindi, you know, they must be more clever than us because they're not African. And you kind of took that for granted, that they're better than us in business and whatever. And they probably were not. Do you know what I mean? But because we gave them that status of, oh, you know, they ran with it. They ran with it and they built their wealth and they stepped on us while doing it. Yes, it was really sad that they were kicked out, but I think at the end of the day, I don't know. It's, I don't want to say too much, but it's hard.
It is hard. And again, I think this is about internalized racism, and it's about internalizing these stereotypes. But also, we just need to do our history and come from an informed place. You know, like under British colonial policy, Indians were given an opportunity to have shops and to engage in commerce. We weren't. We were farming. So that's what you call institutional racism, right? Where you have a head start. So if we started on the same footing, then we can come to the conclusion that Africans are no good. But essentially, this group of people were given a head start. It wasn't just innate that they were just good at this. This is actually just inequality at play.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
definitely.
I think that's a it's weird to say good place to end it, but that is probably the right place to end it, is what I would say. Thank you, Vivian, especially for stepping in and giving us your point of view, and really we really appreciate it. And I just want to say, if you ever do, you know, even if you do read half of the book, actually, because your insight is still valuable, just come through and join us, because it's great. Because otherwise, just me and Katasi chatting, and we can talk anytime anyway. But it'd be nice to have a third. Sorry, Katasi. It'll be nice to have another point of view, and it's always like so illuminating and eye-opening to hear different points of view. So I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming through this time.
Oh, I'm more than happy to. I'll be there next time. Don't worry. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Katigen digibajitunda, all on day the one that fits ya. Katigen digibajitunda.